Uru, Ages Beyond Myst. This was a very interesting little venture that the team for Myst had come up with. This was released in 2003. And technically it was released before Myst IV, even though it's set after. And this is where I really love this one, because of how it expanded on the existence of the world of Myst. It's the first time you aren't necessarily playing the stranger, the same character you played in the previous, in Myst 1 through 4. And it fits more with being after the fourth game because of Yisha's age in the game. Now, it begins, I believe, in Utah at the location excavation site. You meet a individual who's there, but as you play the game, you learn you are basically you've come across the clef. The clef is important in the lore. This was the home of Atris before he was brought into Dunny proper. This was where his grandmother lived and raised him. So this was basically the only home he knew. And when you go down into it, you are then set upon the journey. All the people who, quote, meet, come to the clef, go on this journey. Yisha has placed journey claws all over at 7 points all over this area, and 4 other ages. And as you take the journey and find these journey claws and move on, you find the totems of the Barrow. And you learn the history. The previous Dunnies were masters over a slave race. Could be some of which that they learn the art from. The art of linking books and that. And as you journey through and find the journey claws and that, you learn of the Barrow and of how they were used. Now this one was very interesting because of all of the Myst games, including the fourth one, which was made after this, they were pretty much point and click. You didn't necessarily, well, I'm trying to remember if 4 was the same way, but I think it might have been. Yeah, it was. But this one was free moving. You could literally explore. You weren't bound by point and click rules. And I think it was this fact that people weren't necessarily keen on it at first. But they did keep it. They did reuse it with the final game. But the beauty of this was just the exploration. You are in these beautiful ages, and you use some abstract thinking to solve some of the puzzles. You can't die because if you foul up and take too high of a jump or are going to fall into something dangerous, you relto out. That's the common phrase for it, because you find your own, quote, relto. An age to yourself, an island in the sky. One that you can find pages to customize it. And in fact, that's part of the game in a full version of it, including finding the device called Key, Ki, which would allow you to also take pictures of your journey. And when they made it go online, it was neat how you could share your explorations. You could even journey with others, help them out. There were add-ons that were also released. But back to the main story. You follow the path. You follow the journey. Some parts can't be completed until you complete other parts, which was clever. But by the time you get back and get through it all, you have you'll return to the clef, and it's raining, which is a miracle in the desert. But another beautiful thing is in the area around the clef, you come across two things. First is the remains of the telescope into the star Fisher, and the other is the skeleton or remains of a whelk. Now, these were the creatures these were found in Myst II, or Riven, the sequel to Myst, which officially ties this all together. And the clef is only ever mentioned, and Dunny, you ever really get a glimpse of in Myst, the Book of Atris, and the Book of Tiana, two of the novels that were written. So, this further tied in the books as canon. Now, when they had the online setup, you could go on there, meet with other players and people who played the game. I didn't come across it until their server was closed, and then the fans reopened up a server. And I played it on my prior computer, prior to the one I have at the time, this time, as a free download. And you had such a nice community on there, and they would help you with what they called door runs, because two of the tasks on the add-on, you had to literally, quote, hit 7 cloths in a certain order. And it usually worked like this. What they would do is we would have 4 people, or at least 7 people, or 8. And what we did was one person was called out the order. Well, what it first was, you had one person run to the door. You had others run to where these cloths were. They would then touch the cloth, and the person at the door would tell you the number the cloth is. And then once all 7 numbers were all 7 claws were identified location-wise, they would then start the task. It was a time thing, to which we, or basically, they yell the number, the order that they're supposed to be in, and once you push the sloth, everybody does it, the door opens, and then the people who need that item run through, claiming it. It was a clever thing. And they also had one where you had to find specific locations and be there at specific times. That was a little bit trickier. But the main story, as I said, the main story part of Uru, basically, once you complete it, you meet Yisha, and then you see the Baho, or the Barrel. And they jump into the mountain, which has done a kerblooey thing. And it was a pretty basic story, but with the expansions, you actually got to go around Dunny, as you're part of a group known as the Dunny Restoration Committee. And to go around Dunny is an experience, especially if your only experience is with the books or with just the games. This is the great land that they created. This is their great city, but it's in ruins. The Book of Tiana denotes how the Dunny Empire fell. And so Atreus has been trying to restore it, hence the storyline from 2 for 3 that he's been able to do it. You then but this game is, if anything, it's an experience. To play in the more overworld setting, I don't know if they have servers still online. I've been told they do, and I would love to get back into that. This is, I think this came out like years before Second Life. And I wouldn't be surprised if Second Life used some of this and Warcraft and all that to help establish a foothold for a virtual world. Now, Uru is a very interesting prospect. And it sort of came at a time when they weren't, I guess the fans weren't ready for the free roam. Because its initial reception was not was good, but not as good as they had hoped. And then, of course, Myst IV came out like a year later or so and expanded on the story. And like I said, that's probably part of why. I mean, Myst IV, the Uru, you could actually design your avatar to look like yourself to an extent. And with the kivas, the neighborhoods, you could actually meet people online. Even on the free server, from time to time, Rand Miller would show up. And that was a treat too if you were one of those lucky ones to have met him. And there was also a primitive voice chat capability. And it was, Uru, I think, good for the story. Unfortunately, I think the world building didn't take off as much as they had liked. But it would be interesting if they would ever revisit the project or actually have people develop the area more, in my opinion. But Uru is a nice little point that bridges a gap of time because it's never ever established unless you look on certain lore sites and that um, when the first few games take place. I mean, even the player's guide for the first game hints that you have camera technology, but it doesn't necessarily fall in with the timeline of the series, I don't think. But of course, that's an opinion on my part. But it is a game I do recommend you play it. If you want to understand it better, I suggest you've read the books. And it's interesting as this came out before Myst IV, but in a canon sense, it's after Myst IV. And that's because Yisha is more mature in Uru than she is in Myst IV. And that's all I'm going to say about Uru. But I do recommend it. Was a very interesting game at the time. And literally, it's one of the nicest things it does is it cements the books into canon. And again, that's all I'm going to say about that. Take care, all, and thank you for listening to this retrospective on Myst, well, Uru Ages Beyond Myst.